The goal of the NavCARE program is to help seniors with chronic illnesses live a better life.
Hello, Gladys.
With NavCARE, specially trained volunteer navigators conduct regular visits with clients in the home.
Navigators are very specialized in helping older adults find the resources that they need in the community, and in doing so really make a difference in how they live their experience with chronic illness.
Researchers Barb Pessett and Wendy Duggleby conducted a one-year research project on NavCARE in two communities, Killam, a small town of about 1,000, and Camrose, a larger community of about 19,000. They started by connecting with advisory boards in those communities. Here in Killam, that board was chaired by Jerry Clark.
The importance of being connected is, I think, mandatory in order to be able to make this project work, because of my connections within the facility itself, within the community.
Jerry is an example of the importance of having a community leader behind NavCARE. Before we start anything in these communities, we need to understand the uniqueness of the communities, if there's any barriers to making this happen.
The next step was identifying the NavCARE volunteer coordinator. Juanita, a home care nurse who had lived in the community a long time and was well connected with seniors, was chosen. Juanita selected the volunteers and clients in both communities. Volunteer navigators were given a 2-day training session. The training helped them understand the special challenges that seniors with chronic illnesses face.
We do that by bringing in people that have been navigators in the community, and they do some role playing. And then they have the volunteers do role playing.
Keeping client confidentiality was also stressed.
How do you handle it when you go to the grocery store and someone says to you, "Oh, I understand you're visiting so-and-so, how are they doing?" Number one, you've not been given permission from the older adult to tell anybody that you're visiting as a volunteer navigator, because it doesn't work to say, "I can't tell you anything." But what does work is you say to them, "Have you heard about this NavCARE program?" And just start then to talk about the program and its benefits. So you haven't broken confidentiality, and at the same time you've used it as a teachable moment.
Navigators learned that listening skills are key, and to start by asking the client, what is most important to you today?
What might be most important to you today might be to talk to your family. It might be something like, "I can't get groceries."
The next step was to create a guide listing the services and resources available in that community. Next, the volunteer coordinator met with each client and then matched them with the most suitable volunteer.
All right, bye guys.
Matching up the volunteers and clients, I really struggled with in the beginning, just because I think I overthought it and I worried about personalities and clashing. But I found out very quickly that if I just go with my gut, I had some real success stories.
Gladys, I'd like you to meet Margot. Margot Gladys.
Hi, Margot. Good. I loved her from the first moment. Juanita's very careful in picking people who we will match well with.
They're the ones that I found out both had this great love of reading. And the volunteer works at the public library.
Gladys is a voracious reader. And when I first started here, she didn't have a library card, so I got a library card for her, and I knew what type of books that she liked, so I was bringing books for her to read.
We just sit and chat, maybe over a cup of tea or coffee. She kind of brings the outside world into me, because I can't go out to it that much.
Hi there.
I consider her a very good friend. I guess my back is the worst for me. My lower back, it hardly ever stops hurting.
She suffers with fibromyalgia, so I was doing a lot of research, getting books for her. I made some appointments for her to go to some fibromyalgia clinics.
I've never, ever had a desire to move into a long care facility, but now it's the farthest thing from my mind. I just want to live out my days right here.
I do think the NavCARE program is successful in keeping people in their own homes longer, because the resources that are out there typically can really help these people. Meals on Wheels, we've got some social assistance, financial assistance.
Lorraine. Oh, hi.
Lorraine was also an avid reader, but she was starting to lose her sight. So her navigator contacted CNIB.
And CNIB were very good. I contacted them and they came and visited her in her home. I was amazed at the things that CNIB have. I had no idea. So they provided her with that. It's called a Daisy reader, where you put the tapes in.
Audrey has been great. She's a great lady.
It became very comfortable for Lorraine and I to talk, and she was very worried. She's got a son with a chronic illness and needs a lot of medical attention, and she always felt that she didn't want to bother him because he had all these health issues himself.
It never fails to amaze me how we will tell volunteers things that we will not tell our families. So many of the seniors wanted to save their families from knowing the real truth. Either they'd say my family is too busy, or they'd say they didn't want their families to know this. They wanted their families to think that they were doing just fine. So then they would tell the volunteer about their needs, and the volunteer would go ahead and get the help that they needed. And then the families would turn around and say, I didn't know Mom needed that. I didn't know Dad needed that.
And she was finding just the days were very long, and she was becoming very lonely. It was very obvious she couldn't stay in her home any longer, safely. She had a fall as well. And I met her son and daughter-in-law, and we toured. And by the time we finished, she said, yeah, I'm going to move here.
Once Lorraine moved into the long-term care facility, both her social life and her health started to improve.
She's gaining some weight now. And I mean, she's a tiny little person, but she said, oh, I'm getting so big. And I said, oh, wow. If you call that big.
For me, it's my mobility. I really, it's one of the things I was always afraid of losing in my life.
No longer being able to get around made Dale lonely.
Kind of tough that way.
Dale really needed support, really needed socialization. And this volunteer coming in with his grandson and his dog every other week or so, they just became a real quartet, those four, and they had so much fun together.
This is my life, to be in this house. I like going with my grandma because it's fun.
We will go for a little drive here.
Oh yeah, everybody needs somebody like Mason in their life every now and then. Makes life worthwhile.
It's great. It was great meeting him and becoming friends with him, and we look forward to seeing one another.
That's another thing, when you were out and about, you always found out what's going on here, what's going on there. And now Murray comes over and lets me know what's happening,
My particular client, she had experienced a very huge loss. Her sister had passed away, and her sister and her were incredibly close. They lived together, they had an incredible bond, and it was devastating. I think at that point she just needed a way to share, to vent, to unload, to cry. Yeah, she really didn't have anybody. Who else was going to step in and just give a little bit of support to her? And
those were the biggest success stories, I think, is where there wasn't family involvement, and that person that came to visit them literally turned into a family member.
Volunteer navigators were taught not to try and solve their clients' health problems, but instead navigate them to the resources that could help them.
Come into my office.
Thank
here,
you.
And we'll have a little chitter chat.
The volunteer coordinator was always there for support.
I would get phone calls pretty much any time of the day, wondering what they should do about this or that.
Juanita was incredible for giving, if we had any questions, she was always there.
Each month, a debriefing session was held for all the navigators.
They will come and discuss each one of their clients and the problems they've had, the successes they've had, and then invariably the other volunteers will get great ideas from that, or they can give answers to the problems. It's not just me as a nurse navigator giving the solutions.
so there was that comfort in hearing everybody's story and maybe with some of the struggles they were having too as a navigator. And not just struggles, but the rewards and the joys that came out of it.
Sustainability was a huge goal, And that came to fruition at the end of the research project when the Hospice Society of Camrose and District announced that they would take over both the Killam and Camrose NavCARE programs. Across Canada, more and more NavCARE programs are starting up.
NavCARE has now been implemented in 11 sites across Canada. We have sites in British Columbia, in Alberta, in Ontario, and in Nova Scotia. In addition, we have funding for 15 more sites, and with that scaling up, we will have sites everywhere from Victoria to Newfoundland.
There are people that don't have anyone at the end of their life, that there's somebody there that's not a stranger for them when they need it. So I think this NavCARE it's perfect.
I think it's a win-win for everybody. It'll be better for your community, better for your seniors.
I think it's wonderful, and I hope it carries on for a long time yet, because one day my kids are going to need it.
And so the best way to think about setting up a NavCARE program is either to contact Dr. Wendy Duggleby at the University of Alberta or myself, Barb Pessett, at the University of British Columbia.
Wendy and Barb will tell you about a toolkit they've developed that will work for setting up NavCARE in other communities where NavCARE would be appropriate.
But this is one way to take a very active role in making your community a better place.